So I'm sitting on the floor surrounded by books. What else could that possibly mean but a book haul? Let's jump straight in, shall we? Let's go for the 2 books I actually picked up the most recently, and I did buy myself these books from Blackwell's. My friend Jill and I always go to Blackwell's when I'm in Edinburgh, and we usually get a 3 for 2. Usually I get 1 book and Jill gets 2, but this time I got 2. There were 2 books that I was really interested in and were luckily in 3 for 2. So I got The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. So I actually have The Corset by Laura Purcell, which I'm currently reading at the moment and really enjoying. Very dark and creepy historical novel. But Jill recently just finished this book and was telling me how much I would love it. She gave me the sales pitch of a lifetime and I was convinced. It is about a young woman whose husband dies and she is sort of sent to live in one of his homes. He's obviously quite rich. I think it's set in like the 1800s, and she's pregnant. But when she gets to this sort of crumbling old manor house or whatever it is, she discovers these companions, which are sort of life-size wooden sculptures of people painted to look like people, and this one looks exactly like her. So creepy, 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 so excited. And secondly, I got The Good Doctor by Juno Dawson. This is a Doctor Who novel by Juno Dawson, obviously. So this is part of a series of sort of extra bonus adventures about the Doctor and his or her companions that has been going on for years, ever since it sort of came back. And I'm sure there was probably books like this back surrounding the old Doctors as well. But I used to read these books when Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant and Billie Piper were in the show at various stages. I loved these books as sort of extra adventures of the Doctors and companions. But they're written by a selection of different authors, and I recently got back into Doctor Who with the introduction of the new Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker, as well as the new writer, which I think has just changed things up and given it a new lease of life. And I'm also a fan of Juno Dawson's other work. I've read a lot of her young adult novels as well as some of her non-fiction, and really enjoy her writing. I think it's great fun. So I love the idea of a new Doctor Who novel following Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, written by Juno Dawson, and I cannot wait to read this. Next up is a book I was sent for review by Atlantic Books after I requested it, and that is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. And this is a crime novel which sounds absolutely fantastic. I first saw this one on Simon over at Savage Reads channel and had to request a copy after I heard about it. And this is about 2 sisters, one of whom has just killed her 3rd boyfriend, and our main protagonist turns up to help her sister clean up the mess, and this is not the first time she has had to do this, which is such an interesting premise. Like, I want to know, why is she killing her boyfriends? Why is her sister helping her clean up after these murders? It just sounds absolutely fascinating, like a kind of crime thriller type novel that I have not read before, and I also believe it's sort of like in the literary crime section, so I think this is going to be fantastic. I then have a few books I was sent by Pan Macmillan, 2 of which were sent to me by Emma, who now films the Book Break videos, which is Pan Macmillan's YouTube channel that I used to run, so if you don't watch that, make sure to check it out. I'll link it down below. But I got 2 fantasy novels, one of which is a new release, and that is The Ruins of Kings by Jen Lyons. You know why I picked this one for review. When Emma sent round the email saying that there was copies of this available and I saw that it was about dragons, I instantly requested a copy. I'm so predictable, what can I say? I love me dragon fantasy. It says on the back, the life of Kirin, a humble bard's apprentice, is turned upside down when he's claimed as the lost son of an immoral prince. But far from living the dream, he is subjected to his new family's ruthless ambitions. He is soon horrified to discover he's part of an ancient prophecy, and every side, from gods to demons to dragons, wants him as their pawn. Super excited. And then a book which didn't just come out, but the sequel just came out, and that is Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. So, like I mentioned, the sequel to this book has just come out, but I hadn't read the first one, so I asked if they had any copies of the first one because I thought it sounded like fantastic fun. I know that my friend Elle, who actually works at Pan Macmillan, thinks these are fantastic. And this is a fantasy novel where there's a magical war and we follow our protagonist who is a witch, so excited to finally find out what all of these books are about. It also has a recommendation from Robin Hobb on the front. Fantasy Queen. And lastly, Elle actually gave me a copy of the next book to read, and that is If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Kawamura, and this is a translated Japanese novel published by Picador, which is an imprint of Pan Mac. And I've actually been reading a lot of Japanese literature recently. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've read 3 books recently that were all translated from Japanese, so maybe I'm getting into Japanese literature because I have enjoyed most of them. So I'm excited to check this one out. This one's been all over the internet recently and it sounds really strange. It is about a man who is offered the prospect of one more day on this planet when he finds out he's about to die. But he has to do that in exchange for the loss of something he loves, and I believe that that is his cat. But he didn't know it was going to be his cat when he agreed to this. And it just sounds so strange but intriguing. It's also very short, so I'll have to get around to this one very soon. From Titan Books, I was then sent a copy of The Dark Vault by V.E. Schwab. So this is actually the UK edition of 2 novels that have been bound up together, which are called The Archived and The Unbound. So these are 2 books in a series called the Archive series, and I've never actually read any V.E. Schwab, despite her being a bit of a like Booktube beloved. I see her talked about so often on Booktube, particularly by the American booktubers that I follow. So I'm excited to finally have my hands on a copy of 1 or 2 of her novels to try. It says on the back, each body has a story to tell, a life seen in pictures only librarians can read. The dead are called histories, and the vast realm in which they rest is the archive. Mackenzie Bishop's grandfather first brought her 4 years ago when she was 12 years old, frightened but determined to prove herself. Now her grandfather is dead, and Mac has grown into what he once was, a ruthless keeper, tasked with stopping often violent histories from waking up and getting out. Magic, libraries, history, yes. The next 2 books I was sent by Square Peg, which are an imprint of Vintage, and they sound fabulous. I've actually flicked through both of them and had flicked through one of them before I got sent a copy, and it's these 2 books. The first one is Career Girls, Cautionary Tales for the Working Woman by Ms. T. McGill, and these are fantastic. So they're little short snippets accompanied by an illustration, so like this, and there are split into sections. This one's interacting with colleagues. Let me show you an example. So here's one of the examples of the images, and next to it, it says, 2 espressos and a pain au raisin would be great, is how Fee's boss greets her when she arrives for the 9 o'clock meeting. And a flat white for me, thanks, Patrick, she says, giving him a dead-eyed smile and sitting down to peruse the agenda. So these are kind of tackling kind of sexist workplace scenarios with sort of sarcasm and exasperated sarcasm, shall we say. So I think this is a little bit of like a book in solidarity with other working women at the ridiculous things that women are expected to do that men are not in the workplace, and it just sounds brilliant. And similarly, we have How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings, Non-Threatening Leadership Strategies for Women by Sarah Cooper. This is the one that I'd actually seen before. My friend Rowan had been showing it to me and it made me laugh out loud, so I was so pleased when I was offered a copy to be sent. Again, it's illustrated and it just again has lots of sarcastic quips about making men comfortable in the workplace, and it's obviously tongue-in-cheek, but also kind of highlighting the real inequalities. And on the back it even says, includes 3 fake mustaches to wear in case of unintended threateningness. Brilliant, love it. In a similar vein, I have to say, I was sent this book by Scepter, which is new erotica for feminists. Get what you deserve again and again and again. This is not exactly what it looks like. These are not stories about sex. These are stories about women being treated the way they deserve to be treated, respectfully, in scenarios where they often aren't. So for example, here's a scenario that you think you know what's going to happen. He calls me into his office and closes the door. To promote me. He promotes me again and again. I am wild with ecstasy. And it's just lots of little snippets like that. So it's kind of laid out like this. And these are just so much fun. I love this book. Again, I first seen this one when Lena was talking about it online. I knew I had to have a copy when I was offered one. But I did buy myself a couple of other books recently. The first one is Child of the Northern Spring by Persia Woolley. This is a second-hand copy of like another old school fantasy novel, historical fantasy novel. I mean, look at that cover. You know I am super into these kind of books at the moment. This one is based on the Arthurian legends and follows Guinevere. So it's like a female perspective on the legends of Merlin and Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which I think sounds fantastic, and I can't wait to give this one a shot. I also picked myself up The Author, Towards a Marxist Approach to Authorship by Michael Rosen. So this is a non-fiction book by Michael Rosen, which is actually his PhD thesis. So he wrote this back in 1997, he completed his PhD, and it was about writing children's literature, which is kind of like his main thing. He writes poetry, he writes non-fiction, he writes children's literature, but he's probably best known as a children's author, and he was for a while Children's Poet Laureate. On the back it says, in 1997 I completed a PhD on the subject of authoring a piece of children's literature, a book of poems that was eventually published as You Wait Till I'm Older Than You. In the thesis, I tried to put to one side mystical and romantic ideas around creating poetry and instead locate the whole process in reality. Now, Michael Rosen is somebody whose politics I greatly admire. I've followed him for years, been a fan of his since I was a child, and love kind of seeing what he's saying on Twitter and what discussions he's talking about. And he's often talking about things like education and poverty. So I had to read this. 1, as somebody who would like to write fiction, 2, as somebody who's trying to write a PhD, 3, as somebody who loves Michael Rosen, and 4, as somebody who's into left-wing politics. I had to buy this, so I'm really intrigued to give this one a read. I was then given a book by my friend Jen, and that is the Forward Book of Poetry 2019, the best poems from the Forward Prize. So the Forward Prize is a pretty prestigious poetry prize, and my friend Jen, who has a YouTube channel, Jen V Campbell, is also one of the poets who helped pick the selection for this year's book. So it's a collection of different poems by various different poets, new, up and coming, exciting poets that I haven't read before, which I love because it means I'll probably discover some poets that I'll want to check out full collections by. So can't wait to read this one. We then have 2 books I was sent by Profile Books in honour of Halloween, so it was obviously Halloween recently, and they sent me 2 spooky reads. The first one is The Small Hands, a ghost story by Susan Hill. Now look at that cover, is that not beautifully gorgeous and creepy at the same time? I've never actually read any Susan Hill before, but she's a pretty highly regarded ghost story writer if you're into that genre, and I do like a little creepy book now and then, so I'll be pleased to finally read some of her writing and find out what the fuss is about. But this is about a man who is standing on the stoop or steps up to the front door of a house when he feels a small hand clasp his own, but there's nobody there. It feels like a child's hand, and then he goes around about his own business, his everyday life, and starts to feel this little hand beside him more and more and more. So interested to see what that's all about. And then we have a collection of short stories by Ruth Rendell, another highly regarded author in this genre, called A Spot of Folly, 10 Tales of Murder and Mayhem. So again, an author I've heard a lot about, never read, but since I'm definitely in the mood for kind of spooky, creepy reads at the moment, now that it's darker and colder, I'm excited to finally get around to. I then have a book I was sent by Canongate after I requested it, and that is Jeanette Winterson's tiny little hardback book, Courage Calls to Courage Everywhere. As you can probably tell by the colours on this deals with the rights of women. Behind every great woman is a man who tried to stop her. Got a lot of like fun little feminist quirky books in this haul. But this is basically an essay by Jeanette Winterson, which is a call to arms to women around the United Kingdom. And I just love Jeanette Winterson. I also obviously love books on feminism, but Jeanette Winterson's one of my favourite authors, so when I saw she'd written this little essay and Canongate published it, I had to check it out. And then lastly, I was sent a book Unsolicited, but to my great pleasure, as I'd actually been intrigued by it again after seeing it on Simon of Savage Reads channel, so it felt meant to be. And it's this little book from Bloomsbury, and this is actually a nice little bookmark that they've sent with it. This is Fox 8 by George Saunders, and this is a tiny little book following on with the fox trend that seems to have been going on in literature for the past year or two now. But in this scenario, we follow a fox. We follow a story written from the perspective of a fox. It actually has little illustrations in it as well, which I think is adorable. The beginning of the blurb says, Fox 8 has always been curious and a bit of a daydreamer, and by hiding outside houses at dusk and listening to children's bedtime stories, he has learned to speak human. The power of words and the stories built from them is intoxicating for a fox with a poetic soul, but there is danger on the horizon and a new shopping mall is being built, cutting off his pack's food supply. To save himself and his fellow foxes, Fox 8 will have set out on a harrowing quest from the wilds of nature's deep into the dark hearts of suburbia. Sorry, I'm just laughing because this sounds brilliant, but it also sounds like a children's story that my mum used to make up for me when I was a kid. So when I was little, my mum used to like make up this ongoing story for me when I was a kid about Ladybird, and then also some of the Ladybirds like pals who were like other insects and bugs from the garden, like snails and slaters and stuff. But the ladybird was the protagonist, and she would go on all these different adventures, you know. Sometimes she would be going to the dentist because, say, I was going to the dentist as a child, so it would be like that. But one of the overarching stories was that they were trying to build like a giant supermarket or something in one of our like gorgeous parks in Edinburgh, and all of the like insects went to protest it. That's just kind of what this reminded me of, so I'm really intrigued to read this. But those are all the books I had to show you in this haul. Loads of exciting different little things, lots of fun fantasy as well as comedy and non-fiction. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, but until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys.